Well, what do you think? We're going a little bit crazy with the trimming, right? Yeah, so obviously these are some pretty fancy weapons, right? Fishing rod. That's all it is. But it has trims. And you can probably tell by the rest of my inventory, I've gone ahead and I've expanded the trimming system to include weapons. Ooh. Was a bit of work though, doing all the models, right? Because everything has to be built manually. I can't just have, for instance, the color palettes be attributed to item trims. They only work in terms of the model generation. So you do have to assign all of the textures yourself, but it's not too much of a big deal. We'll clear our inventory though. We'll start from scratch. So basically, this is my plan going forward, is to utilize the trim slot for weapons and abilities, right? So for instance, this one, we have Spell Burst as a pattern. Now this pattern will be inaccessible to the player, but will be useful when I do spells, for instance, because you can see there it says cast spells in a cone. So depending on the pattern, I can trigger a different scoreboard mechanism, right? So in this case, it would be whatever the cast mechanic is. Usually I have a counter that just detects when the player is shifting or something like that, and then this would produce projectiles in a cone in front of the player. Now I have expanded it to include all of my normal mechanics, right, for special abilities. So usually I do like on hit effects, blocking, taking damage, sneaking, sprinting. All those have been extended to the pattern mechanic. So for instance, if we were to change this to weapon underscore dealt and the material, instead of ancient, I've come up with a affinity system. So for instance, affinity underscore will do nether. So the way that all the special abilities of weapons will work is through the upgrade system. Now, obviously, I haven't fully fleshed it out, but I just wanted to sort of explain what I'm hoping to do going forward. So you can see it says trigger effects by attacking, and then, well, I haven't actually done the translate, right, the en underscore JSON language, whatever it is, the document. So it's just trim material, Minecraft.affinity nether, and essentially I'll have 8 schools of abilities, or, you know, affiliations, affinities, nether being one of them. So for instance, this might do a fire effect when we attack something if it has this upgrade. And the upgrade system is really great because I can look for upgrades in themselves, I can look for patterns, I can look for materials, whereas if you have a lore slot, right, it gets a bit complicated when you have a whole stream of lore, because they're not defined as their own regions, they're all just lore in terms of NBT. But yeah, so that is the next step going forward, right? What I want to flesh out and develop in terms of a weapon system. I'll use this for archery, for magic, and melee combat, right? So depending on the pattern, which will control the trigger effects, so in this case, again, trigger effects by attacking, and then the material, which will affect the actual ability of the weapon. But in this course of events, for this tooltip to actually show up, for the upgrade NBT to actually be translated, you have to make all the different equipment actually trimmable in terms of a smithing table, right? So I had to, for instance, to be able to use this on a sword, I had to make swords now be trimmable in terms of a smithing table, which means, well, to stop, you know, bad textures or anything like that, or the player having issues, you know, accidentally shift clicking and then it appearing weird, I have gone ahead and added all weapons to the trimming system. So the attributes that we've been working with have been extended. So for instance, this diamond sword that gives luck, it's in our main hand, it'll give luck. It's in our offhand, it'll give luck. And of course, it is textured slightly, right? It's got the emerald trim on the end there. In terms of actual like new weapons or anything like that, I don't think I will add any for the existing templates. All I've done is added in, you know, regions that get re-dyed with the material color. But for instance, we have our new ancient, celestial, and archer's armor. So if we take a look at those, the material would be ancient. Pattern doesn't really matter. We'll go back to century because that's on my mind, right? A simple one. And then we do not a fishing rod. We'll go with an axe, which I need to, you know, set a actual metal. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Right. So this is now a custom model, if you will. Right. It's not just a netherite axe. It's an ancient axe, quote unquote. So in terms of all the affinities or these special abilities, I will be adding unique sprites, but everything else is just retextured. So for instance, blaze rods, they'll do, and we'll take out What haven't we seen? We'll take out a pickaxe. Right, we'll take out a iron pickaxe. I've also made wooden weapons and stone weapons from all. Right, you can add the material to whatever you would like, just to make sure it encompasses everything. Because that's the other thing. I would like to rebalance so that, you know, every piece of equipment is applicable. Because that's a big thing I like in games, right? You're rewarded for taking something with, say, less armor by the way of better status effects, right? So leather might have attack speed and attack damage to compensate for the fact that it lacks armor. So iron pick, blaze rod, and there we go. We get a blaze rod pickaxe, right? So it's just that slight little trim, but it of course gives the attributes. The only other issue I have is you can sort of see the model up there, right? It looks a bit odd. Because where the trim gets overlaid on top of the item, they collide, right? Because it's not spaced out properly like a normal model. So the easiest solution to that would be to, well, manually do all the sprites. Because right now I have whatever pickaxe is layer 0, and then the trim is layer 1. Right, so that makes it super simple. I just need one image file for all of the different materials, and then I just use the inbuilt iron pickaxe, stone pickaxe, wood pickaxe, and whatnot. So I don't know. How do you feel about the clipping? Is it something that I really need to fix up? Because it's only minor. On some objects, it's a bit worse. For instance, we saw the fishing rod before. So, fishing rods, yes. It's probably the weird one, right? Why have I made them trimmable? Well, the idea is, with a bow, what would you like to use? What would, you know, be compatible with someone fighting with a bow? Because in your offhand, you can't swing a sword. You can use a shield, I guess. But I like the idea of a fishing rod. Being able to, you know, hook your enemies and then shoot a bow. Something like that. Well, I don't think you can... Can you right-click while you have a bow out? Because I know with some equipment, it'll, yeah, prioritize that. So you'd have to hook, then swap to the bow or something like that. Either way. What I've done is I have obviously modified the end sprite, if you will. So for instance, if you go to trim a fishing rod, right, it no longer will look like a fishing rod. You go fishing rod, template, and material, it gets sort of fashioned into a shiv, right? But then I've also changed the position. So it's more like a fist weapon, right? Because the idea is if you have a bow and you have this in your offhand, like you're pulling the bowstring with the little tab, or it doesn't get in the way, right? So it's actually usable. I think this, in terms of an equipment utility, looks decent. And then, of course, you know, you've still got the hook, because it is a fishing rod. So hook out, hook in. I don't know, I like the idea. And then, as I had in the start, right, with the ancient trim, it's more of a claw. We change this to a fishing rod. We now have our 3-pronged claw. And I was going to use tridents, actually. But tridents are a bit more complicated, same with shields. I haven't quite grasped how to influence the models, because they use the inbuilt entity generation. I don't know how to get it to use new textures without completely making a new model, which is something, again, I don't have experience with, and to address, right? Because I get often comments or advice to use, say, like Blockbench or a integrated development environment. I don't want to, simply put. Right, to me, that's not advice. That's trying to get me to do it your way, and I'm not going to do it your way. I'm going to do it my way. I enjoy learning and developing the skills from scratch. So, for instance, in terms of the claw here, right, I had to figure out the rotation, the translate, all the array values in the model data myself. Right, so I have a better understanding of what they actually do. I didn't use Blockbench to actually just tell me where things need to be if I want to map it to a player. Which is, again, a skill I would like to develop and be able to understand and, again, do manually. So, thank you for the advice, but I will politely decline, and I will stick to my ways, right? It's working out, so, you know, it's not all bad. But yeah, is there anything else to really go over? Well, I suppose the abilities, right? Because this now has Sentinel plating. That's another thing. I changed the wording again. So, it better emphasizes, because it was Sentinel armor, right? Which doesn't really apply if it's on a weapon. So it's just Sentinel plating. So all the templates are plating, quote unquote, and then the material. So I do want to add basic abilities for all of the templates, right? So as sort of like intros or starting out, unlocks or enchantments, right? The next scale up to combat. So for instance, what's one I can think of off the top of my head? A tidal, right? It might submerge the enemy in water. Okay, so an on-hit effect, whatever you've trimmed with it, if you hit a mob or a player, they'll quote-unquote drown for a little bit. I think that's a decent way to handle the templates, and then the actual complex mechanics, or I should say abilities, special effects, whatever you want to call them, will come again from the system that I want to develop, which is, again, material will control the affinity, right? So the school of magic or whatever you want to call it. And then the pattern will control the trigger mechanism. So be it on hit, block, different casting mechanics, or even the archery. I think I have like standard arrows, a short range but burst of arrows. So rather than shooting one, you'll shoot a couple. Teleport to your arrows. I think there was 4. I can't quite remember them all. But yeah, I think that's the plan going forward. I just wanted to do this more so as a little update to show you what I have been doing, because it has taken me quite a while to actually, you know, do all the sprites and write out all the model documents. Well, actually, the model documents aren't too hard. You do one and then you just copy and paste. And you just replace a keyword here and there. And if you set up the directories appropriately, it's really no big deal. But yeah, there you go. Weapons, all trimmable now. Fishing rod, now a specialty offhand weapon if you fashion it into one. Right. Just have to add attributes and stuff to it. Yeah, okay, so timeline. We should discuss that. The next step is to rebalance armor through an attribute mechanic. So some way to smith it into a finished product, right, if you will. So for instance, netherite, I might increase the armor, give it, you know, a little bit of health, movement speed, just tack on all the different attributes and balance all the armors around one another. That way everything is applicable. Do the same for weapons and armor. So for instance, an axe might become significantly slower, but a lot more damage, and then around the different materials as well. And then we can probably work on the special abilities. And then that's the armor system done, pretty much. There'll probably be spellcasting, archery, and then mobs, and then the initial release. So hopefully not too far away now. Anyway, that's all for this little update. Hope you enjoyed. See ya.